As the title of this discussion indicates, its theme is the relationship of the events presented in my novel, Atlas Shrugged, to the actual events of today's world. Or to put the question in a form which has often been addressed to me, is Atlas Shrugged a prophetic novel or a historical one? The second part of the question seems to answer the first. If some people believe that Atlas Shrugged is a historical novel, this means that it was a successful prophecy. The truth of the matter can best be expressed as follows. Although the political aspects of Atlas Shrugged are not its central theme, nor its main purpose, my attitude toward these aspects, during the years of writing the novel, was contained in a brief rule I had set for myself. The purpose of this book is to prevent itself from becoming prophetic. The book was published in 1957. Since then, I have received many letters and heard many comments which amounted in essence to the following. When I first read Atlas Shrugged, I thought that you were exaggerating, but then I realized suddenly, while reading the newspapers, that the things going on in the world today are exactly like the things in your book. And so they are, only more so. The present state of the world, the political events, proposals, and ideas of today, are so grotesquely irrational that neither I nor any other novelist could ever put them into fiction. No one would believe them. A novelist could not get away with it. Only a politician might imagine that he can. The political aspects of Atlas Shrugged are not its theme, but one of the consequences of its theme. The theme is the role of the mind in man's existence, and, as a corollary, the presentation of a new code of ethics, the morality of rational self-interest. The story of Atlas Shrugged shows what happens to the world when the men of the mind, the originators and innovators in every line of rational endeavor, go on strike and vanish, in protest against an altruist collectivist society. There are two key passages in Atlas Shrugged that give a brief summary of its meaning. The first is a statement of John Galt. There is only one kind of man who have never been on strike in human history. Every other kind and class have stopped when they so wished, and have presented demands to the world claiming to be indispensable, except the men who have carried the world on their shoulders, have kept it alive, have endured torture as sole payment, but have never walked out on the human race. Well, their turn has come. Let the world discover who they are, what they do, and what happens when they refuse to function. This is the strike of the men of the mind, Miss Taggart. This is the mind on strike. The second passage, which explains the title of the novel, is, "Mr. Reardon," said Francisco, his voice solemnly calm, "if you saw Atlas, the giant who holds the world on his shoulders, if you saw that he stood, blood running down his chest, his knees buckling, his arms trembling, but still trying to hold the world aloft with the last of his strength, and the greater his effort, the heavier the world bore down upon his shoulders, what would you tell him to do?" "I don't know. What could he do? What would you tell him?" "To shrug." The story of Atlas Shrugged presents the conflict of two fundamental antagonists, two opposite schools of philosophy, or two opposite attitudes toward life. As a brief means of identification, I shall call them the reason-individualism-capitalism axis versus the mysticism-altruism-collectivism axis. The story demonstrates that the basic conflict of our age is not merely political or economic, but moral and philosophical, that the dominant philosophy of our age is a virulent revolt against reason, that the so-called redistribution of wealth is only a superficial manifestation of the mysticism-altruism-collectivism axis, that the real nature and deepest, ultimate meaning of that axis is anti-man, anti-mind, anti-life. What is the cultural atmosphere of our day? See whether the following description fits it. I quote from Atlas Shrugged, from a passage referring to a series of accelerating disasters and catastrophes. The newspapers did not mention it. The editorials went on speaking of self-denial as the road to future progress, of self-sacrifice as the moral imperative, of greed as the enemy, of love as the solution, their threadbare phrases as sickeningly sweet as the odor of ether in a hospital. Rumors went spreading through the country in whispers of cynical terror, yet people read the newspapers and acted as if they believed what they read, each competing with the others on who would keep most blindly silent, each pretending that he did not know what he knew, each striving to believe that the unnamed was the unreal. It was as if a volcano were cracking open, yet the people at the foot of the mountain ignored the sudden fissures, the black fumes, the boiling trickles, and went on believing that their only danger was to acknowledge the reality of these signs. The purpose of my discussing this today was not to boast, nor to leave you with the impression that I possess some mystical gift of prophecy, but to demonstrate the exact opposite, that gift is not mystical. Contrary to the prevalent views of today's alleged scholars, history is not an unintelligible chaos ruled by chance and whim. Historical trends can be predicted and changed. Men are not helpless, blind, doomed creatures carried to destruction by incomprehensible forces beyond their control. There's only one power that determines the course of history, just as it determines the course of every individual life, the power of man's rational faculty, the power of ideas. If you know a man's convictions, you can predict his actions. If you understand the dominant philosophy of a society, you can predict its course. But convictions and philosophy are matters open to man's choice. There is no fatalistic, predetermined historical necessity. Atlas Shrugged is not a prophecy of our unavoidable destruction, but a manifesto of our power to avoid it if we choose to change our course. It is the philosophy of the mysticism, altruism, collectivism axis that has brought us to our present state, and is carrying us toward a finale such as that of the society presented in Atlas Shrugged.